All right, welcome. We are talking about Federalist number 10, right? So we're continuing on with our required foundational document, Federalist number 10, written by James Madison. And it is one of the Federalist Papers, right, that are arguing for the ratification of the Constitution. So we have this Constitution that's been drafted. There's this debate going on. Should it be accepted? Should it be rejected? We have the Federalists who want the ratification of the Constitution. We have the Anti-Federalists who fear that a larger republic are going to infringe on the rights of the people. Obviously, the weaknesses and the failures of the articles play into this also. So this is going to be his argument for the Constitution. And he's going to argue that we need to ratify the Constitution because it's going to help tame the effect of faction. And he even starts the very first sentence, right? So I'm going to go through some of the critical points I think you need to really understand. You can read this, you can outline this, you can highlight this all you want. But these are some of the critical points I think are you know necessary to understand what Madison is talking about. Okay, so it's his argument for the Constitution. Why should we ratify the Constitution? And he says in the very first sentence, among the numerous advantages proposed by a well-constructed union, this is just one of many, right? None deserves to be more accurately developed than its tendency to break and control the violence of faction. Okay, so what are factions? Great question. He's going to go on to explain that factions are right here. By a faction, I understand a number of citizens, whether among be a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest, adverts to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community. Okay, so he's talking about people with like-minded opinions, people that believe in the same thing. What's the problem with that? He's going to go on and tell us, right? He talks about the ways that we can eliminate factions, right? But in a republic, that is necessary. Factions are necessary to our liberty, to our freedom, right? There are two methods of removing the cause of faction. One by destroying the liberty which is essential to its existence. You can't have liberty without having factions. You can't allow people to think freely and not have factions. It's inevitable. This is what he's saying. It's inevitable. You cannot prevent it, right? You can, but it's destroying our liberty. And the other, by giving every citizen the same opinions. So eliminating factions, allowing people to congregate to think alike, right? Or just having everybody think the same way. Kind of goes hand in hand, but if you really want to get rid of factions, that's the way to do it. That's not what he's arguing, right? He's saying we can't do that. That's destroying factions is worse than the problem itself. He even goes on to say that. You can read that there. Okay. So the next thing I want to go to is the most common and durable source of factions has been the various and unequal distribution of property. What is the first biggest cause of factions? The haves and the have-nots. Haves and the have-nots, right? The people that have property and those that don't. They're going to be constantly competing. They're going to be constantly arguing. They're going to be constantly trying to get what others have, right? All right, so if we scroll down here, keep going. The causes of faction cannot be removed, and that relief is only sought by the means of controlling its effects. They're inevitable. Unless you want to take away everybody's liberty, that's not what he's saying. That is undemocratic, right? And that's not what he's saying. So the best way is to control its effects. How do you control its effects? By this new constitution, right? This new constitution creating a large republic. Okay. The existence of the same. So what is it attainable? Up here, he talks about factions and majority factions are dangerous. If it contains less than a majority, doesn't matter because majority factions, the majority of the people are going to prevent that faction from becoming tyrannical, right? A majority faction is probably the most dangerous faction, but here's how we're going to control it, right? Either the existence of the same passion of interest in a majority at the same time must be prevented, or the majority having such coexistent passion or interest must be rendered by their number and local situation unable to concert and carry out into effect schemes of oppression. That's how you control factions. That's how you limit not control, but that's how you're going to limit the effects of that. Okay, how are you going to do that? You ask. You allow many factions to compete against each other, right? A pure democracy, by which I mean a society consisting of a small number of citizens who assemble. He's talking about direct democracy here. This is not going to tame the mischief of factions. Why? Because the majority is going to dominate the minority. Okay, so he's talking about in a republic, right? In a republic, by which I mean a government in which the scheme of representation takes place. We choose people to represent us in government. This is the type of government we have, right? This is what the Constitution creates. And this is going to control this. This is going to control the effects of factions. You allow many factions to compete against each other, it's going to prevent any faction from becoming too powerful, right? Um, Under such regulation, it may well happen, this is his counterpoint, it may well happen that the public voice pronounced by the representatives of the people will be more, no, this, I'm sorry, this is not his counterpoint, but what he's saying here is that uh, it may well happen that the public voice pronounced by the representatives of the people will be more consonant to the public good than if pronounced by the people themselves. So because we are electing our representatives, because we're choosing people to represent us in government, they probably are going to be more democratic. They're going to be more patriotic than if they just represented ourselves. If we represented ourselves in government, right? They're tied to the people, is what he'd say. Um, each representative will be chosen by a greater number of citizens in the large and in the small republic. So we're going to have more representatives. It'll be more difficult for unworthy candidates to practice with success the vicious arts by which elections are too often carried. And the suffrages of the people being more free will be more likely to center on men who possess the most attractive merit and the most diffusive and established character. So he's saying, in by electing many people, right, we're going to be able to weed out incompetent leaders. We're going to be able to weed out people that are um, these unworthy candidates, in his words, right? All right. The federal constitution forms a happy combination in this respect, the great and aggregate interests being referred to the national and the local, in particular to the state legislature. So here he's talking about federalism, right? He's using federalism as his argument. You're going to have the state and local governments closely tied to the people to represent their needs, and then you're going to have the national government to represent the bigger needs, the aggregate needs for the whole country. It's a great medium. It's a great medium, as he refers it to. Happy combination. Okay, so extend the sphere. He's talking about representation here. Extend the sphere, and you take in greater variety of parties and interests. This is what he's talking about. You allow a lot of factions to compete, right? Extend the sphere, allow as many factions as possible to compete in a large republic. What's that going to do? It's going to prevent any faction from becoming overpowered. Right? You take into a greater variety of parties and interests. You make it less probable that a majority of the whole will have a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens. More faction. He's basically saying more factions equals less ability to, you know, to become tyrannical. More factions, or the sound, more factions equals less influence that factions will have. Right? The less influence that factions will, the less ability factions will have to invade on minority factions. You allow a lot of them to compete, and the effects of the majority will not be as damaging in a large republic. Okay. Scroll down. The influence of factious leaders may kindle a flame within their particular states, but it will be unable to spread a general conflagration through the other states. So, yeah, you might have some factions dominating in states. You might have a state faction that can control the state, but in a large republic, again, you're having a lot of factions competing against each other. It's not going to be able to spread to the other states, right? It's going to be confined in that locality, in that region. So that's the big idea, right? You allow all these factions to come together in a large republic, allow them to compete. It's going to make them less tyrannical. It's going to make their effects less dangerous. It's going to be able to control factions. It's basically what he's saying. Factions are inevitable, yet controllable in a large republic. That's his point, right? So hopefully that makes sense. And thank you for watching.